extreme campaign mobility and effectiveness through air superiority, or very durable single-unit armies with simple tactics. If that interests you, keep watching. Greetings, I'm Sophis. Today we're covering two builds in Age of Wonders 4. The common theme between the two of them is a focus on mounted units, making use of the new traits available with the latest update. First, we have the Storm Riders, making the most out of the 4-point trait for Eagle mounts, with a level of mobility that makes exploring, repositioning, and reinforcing very easy. In battle, they feature a very simple army composition that can play around with a few supports. Second, we have the Dwarven Scorchers, an elephant-riding faction paying homage to the theme of the Ashlands primal culture, but instead featuring the power of industrial might. The units you'll be fielding become increasingly tankier as your campaign progresses, until you become a tide of fire, ash, and conquest. So, let's get started with the Storm Riders. The form trait doesn't matter. What matters is that you pick the Eagle Rider's trait and any other trait. I went with Sharp Eyes. Culture is feudal. Society traits are experienced seafarers and fabled hunters. One thing to note is that this build has different configurations depending on whether your map will have sea tiles or be mostly land. If you aren't going to have sea tiles, instead replace experienced seafarers for adept settlers. Your first tome is Cryomancy, because there is no tier 1 tome that gives ranged units a lightning infusion on their attacks, and frost arrows seem like the closest match to the storm theme. The White Witch is also a good battle mage unit that gets a mount, so you'll have it as a supporting option in case you want it for your army composition. The ability to freeze on demand is very useful. The ruler type is Champion to benefit your non-hero units and help a possible vassal playstyle, but you can go with anything you feel is more suitable. I've chosen Elves for a form as I find it a suitable foil for the dwarf theme build later on in this video. So this is the tome setup. Cryomancy as previously mentioned, and Beasts as your second tier 1 tome. The reason is that it gives you another mounted unit you can use as a support and the buffs to animal and cavalry units contained in the tome. The build really kicks off with your first tier 2 tome, which is Glades. The Glade Runner will be your main damage dealer with a front line of defenders to protect them. Their Tracker's Mark ability is very useful and a free action, and they are also one of the tome archer units at this tier that gets a mount, unlike the Zephyr Archer. The aspect of the route will also play a part in making your defenders last longer in combat. Next up, we have Tome of Scrying for a few reasons. First, it has guided projectiles to help our ranged units suffer less penalties, and the Mental Mark spell is good to capitalize on debuffing your enemies with Marked. Second, the campaign benefits of the Tower of True Sight and Scry enemy complement the playstyle of being this highly mobile force. And third, it fulfills part of the affinity requirements we need for the next tomes at tier 3. You will also need to pick an astral signature skill with your leader to ensure you have at least 3 astral affinity before you go on researching your tier 3 tomes. You may have noticed the Tome of Winds is here on the list, and I will address it in full later. The benefits it brings are not worth delaying your other tomes. If anything, it should come third or at least second to last in this build. So, on to tier 3. We will take both of the astral ones at this stage, starting with Tome of Amplification. It has amplified arrows, our lightning infusion to our ranged attacks, and a very useful enchantment overall. The rest in this tome isn't as important, but Astral Blood and Chain Lightning are good. Pick them if you want, or choose the research options with lower turns to get to the next tome faster. Now, Tome of Teleportation. This one doesn't directly affect your military, but it plays into the whole idea of this build, mobility. The Chrono Gate is a useful secondary teleporter structure for your cities, and the Mass Recall spell is good for emergencies. The Astral Trade Relay is one of the structures that will help reinforce your economy to fund your armies. Now we get to Tier 4, sort of. It's up to you and your campaign to decide what to prioritize first. If you want to improve your armies, go for Winds now. It has the Seeker Arrows enchantment to improve your Glade Runner's range, and favorable winds expands your army mobility even further. Your other tome at this stage would be Stormborn, if you're playing on a map with ocean tiles. The biggest downside of this build is that we cannot benefit from the Naga transformation that this tome has, as it will dismount all of our units and make the hefty trade cost we pay to get eagles pointless. However, the hero skill you get is very useful and similar to the Amplified Arrows enchantment on your units. The Bounty of the Sea will boost your coastal tile production, and the Stormport will be the other half of your economical structure combo alongside the Astral Trade Network. Since you are feudal, you should have plenty of cities to maximize the bonus of both. And Lightning Storm, of course, is a very thematic spell to grab for this. If you didn't pick an ocean map, the alternative to the Tome of the Stormborn would be Fey Mists. It isn't as synergistic as Stormborn, but I feel it still plays into the cloudy fog sort of feel for the theme of this, and you will be debuffing your enemy's chance to hit you. Lastly, we have the Tome of the Goddess of Nature. The biggest benefit of this tome is Force of Nature, an enchantment that boosts your damage and critical hit on cavalry units. And since your whole army is cavalry, well, it's no-brainer as a pick. Early game you'll still feel slightly constrained since you'll have mixed units, and it'll take a little while until you can field an army composed of just Eagle cavalry. But it isn't too punishing. I would advise phasing out your non-cavalry units as soon as you are able, however. You'll see just how much your mobility changes afterwards. Once you get the Glade Runners and the Defenders, everything sort of evens out, and you'll have a very consistent playstyle from mid to late game, with most additions only reinforcing the core of your build. This build doesn't have any flashy heavy hitter units, but it makes up for it with mobility and versatility. I would recommend an army composition of a hero, 2 or 3 defenders, depending on whether your hero is melee or ranged, then a backline of Glade Runners. You can swap out a Glade Runner for a Wild Speaker if you wanted summoning expendable units, or a White Witch for the freeze capability, but you can also forego either and keep the composition simple. I've had decent results with any of these configurations. So the Storm Riders is a fairly straightforward build, and I found it to be one of the easiest factions to play given how easy it is to move and adapt to situations as they arise, as well as the early advantage you get in exploration with your superior mobility. Now for the Dwarven Scorchers. Pick any form you want, just keep in mind it'll get affected by super growth, so it can get a little cartoony depending on the form. The traits I picked were Desolate Adaptation, Hardy, and Elephant Mounts. The culture is industrial, and the society traits are Prolific Swarmers to give our units upkeep reduction, and Druidic Terraformers to boost our cities with rocky terrain, and Ashland bonuses that boost production and gold. The first tome is Pyromancy. We mostly want the enchantment for our melee units. The rest is optional. The structure included in the tome is useful to generate mana if you build foresters before scorching the land. I choose champion, but any ruler type works for this build. This is the tome setup. Pyromancy, as priorly mentioned, followed by enchantment. Here we get the second upgrade to our units with Sundering Blades and Spell-Tempered Shields, all for improving our defenses while lowering the enemies. Next up is Glades. The point of this tome is Aspect of the Root and Leaf Skin. I realize it deviates from the theme, but the benefits in this case are well worth it, and you can toggle off the appearance of both in your spell tome. Having your bastions with self-heal and extra resistance will pay off. Then we're back to the Materian tomes with artificing. What we want from here is artisan armaments to boost our critical hit chance, and the golden mine isn't a bad building to have. Now we get to the other reason we picked a nature tome at tier 2, the Tome of Vigor. Supergrowth combined with the elephant mounts will turn a unit of bastions into a single unit. In case you don't know, the effectiveness of units drops with the amount of models that die as your HP decreases. So by having this, it ensures that your unit is at full power from maximum to 0 HP and gives another retaliation attack to boot. Our second tome at this tier is Devastation. Flame Burst weapons alongside artisan armaments give you a total of 50% critical hit chance bonus, and Flame Burst adds a nice extra effect when you kill an enemy, good for thinning out swarms of foes. At tier 4, you have options. For theming, I would recommend Crucible and Severing. One has plenty of fire-themed spells, and the other gives you Null Shield to give your bastions yet another boon. However, I would also suggest an alternative path. Instead of picking Crucible, choose the Transmutation Tome for Steel Skin and Adaptive Armor and raise your defense even further. Then, when you hit tier 5, instead of picking the Tome of the Creator, just pick Crucible. Neither directly benefit your bastion units, but out of the two, I would say Crucible has more benefits and suits the feeling of this faction more. Far as the early game is concerned, nothing out of the ordinary. Just work with the industrial units you've got at the start. Then, when you can start recruiting bastions, just stick with them. From that point, your strategy is set. Bastions are a fairly straightforward unit to use in combat, being more defensive and reactive rather than offensive. But don't shy away from going on the offensive if it lets you pin down troublesome foes. You can have other units in the army, and if you want to do that, I recommend the Arbalest. It is a lower tier ranged unit, but its overdrawn shot ability breaks the defense modes on enemies. And being a single shot mounted unit, you can make the most out of your movement every turn. Also, a lot of the tomes you pick will give ranged enchantments that benefit them, if you really want this playstyle. Far as your leader and heroes go, I would recommend investing in the support skills, even just a little. These units get expensive, so minimally the upkeep reduction skill is welcome. But the other skills, adding strength, defense, health, and resistance, will make your bastions even more formidable. By the late game, your bastion units will be fairly ridiculous and comparable to itemless hero units. Ride into battle with your 6-unit army and come out victorious. And that's what I have for you today. I hope you've enjoyed the two builds and that you have fun with either of them on your own campaigns. This might be the last build video for Age of Wonders 4 I make for a little while, at least until the next DLC comes out. If you have games you'd be interested in seeing builds and strategies for, please tell me below. Until the next one, have a good day.